You may know that I was a cantor before I became a rabbi, and the music of the synagogue is very important to me. And I hope that it may be for you as well, and so I thought I would share this in honor of Shabbat Shirah, the Shabbat of song. One of the beautiful things about Jewish services is that they are always chanted. Every part of the service has an appropriate nusach, or prayer chant melody. That is, it has a particular mode, which is like a musical scale, and particular motifs that go with it for that place in the Siddur. So here are the modes. The first one is freygish, sometimes known as Ahavah Rabbah, and even if you speak Yiddish, you may not be familiar with the term freygish. That's because it comes from the Greek Phrygian, meaning the scale that begins with a half tone between the first and second step. We think of this mode as sounding very Jewish, like Hava Nagila, but actually, this mode comes from Arabic music. And then there's minor mode, which of course has weekday and Shabbat and festival variants. And then there's major, which to Western ears sounds particularly joyous, although not necessarily to Jews. Then there's Adonai Malakh mode that has a flatted seventh up here, so it sounds a little different from major, but it's a very useful mode as well. And then there is also pentatonic, which we use for the Shmoneh Esrei, which is the weekday Amidah, and it goes like this. Even though pentatonic means it has 5 tones, there actually are a few more than that. Those are a few of the modes, and now we're going to talk about the motifs, which are the patterns that we use when singing in a particular part of the service. So weekday minor, for example, differs from Shabbat not in the scale, but in the motifs that we use on weekdays. So for example, this is weekday minor. Ashrei yoshevei veitecha od yalelucha selah. And now for comparison, here's Shabbat. Shochenad marom vekadosh shemo. There is a subtle difference in the motifs, which creates a different sound, so you can recognize that it's Shabbat. And festival minor is also different. Eloheinu v'Elokei avotenu, ya'aleh v'yavo v'yagia b'yom. For example, Chag HaMatzot hazeh. And then another minor mode is Selihah mode, used mostly on high holidays, and that also has different motifs. Avinu Malkeinu chatanu lefanecha, Avinu Malkeinu en lanu melech elata. Each of these modes use the motifs in a simple structure. So first we have an opening motif, which goes like this, and then an extending motif, which you use like this, and then there's the pre-concluding motif, and finally the concluding motif. So when we put the mode and these motifs together, we get something like this. Opening. Tehillat Adonai Rabbi. Extending. Vivarech kol basar shem kodsho leolam vaed. Pre-concluding. Va'anachnu nevarech ya. Concluding. Me'ata ve'ad olam. Hallelujah. That was weekday minor. And now Shabbat minor. Opening. Befi sharim tidalal. Extending. Uvdivrei tzadikim tidbarach. Pre-concluding. Uvilshon chasidim tidromam. Concluding. Uvekerev kedoshim tidkadash. Every part of every service, whether weekday or Shabbat, or Yom Tov or high holiday, has a distinct nusach. Chazanim and Baalei Tefillah, that's the term for prayer leaders, have historically tried to keep these nusachim distinct. That is, not using Shabbat nusach on weekdays or high holidays, or keeping evening motifs separate from morning motifs, and so forth. Even the learning of Talmud and the Beit Midrash has a traditional nusach. Many of us know it from the Haggadah of Pesach, because you might have learned it to chant the 4 questions like this. This was referred to in Yiddish as Lernenshteiger, which means the learning mode. The goals here are twofold. First, applying the principle of minhah avotenu be'adeinu. That is, our ancestors' customs are in our hands, and it is up to us to maintain our holy musical traditions. Second, that maintaining the distinctive structure of nusach tradition prevents all of synagogue and ritual music from sounding the same. You would not want high holidays to sound like weekday or to sound like Shabbat. It makes tefillah more appealing and holy when there is a variation in sound that matches the occasion. A third part of the equation is metrical tunes, sometimes referred to as congregational melodies. In these, everybody can sing along. You already know many of these tunes, like Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol, or Ki vanu vaharta, or Veha-er Eineinu b'toratecha, and so forth. Virtually all of these melodies were composed by cantors, also called chazanim, and other musical Jewish folks within the last 150 years or so. This tune, for example, was composed by the Chazan Eliezer Gerowitsch in the 19th century in Russia, but it is still very popular today. An exception is this melody, which we use on Tisha B'Av. Scholars believe that it came from the Crusaders, yeah, you heard that right, in the 12th century in France, and that is why it sounds so mournful to us. But there is a small subset of melodies that are the oldest kind of congregational melodies, called MiSinai tunes. These are so that we often do not know how old they are, like Kol Nidrei. They certainly do not go as far back as Mount Sinai. That's what MiSinai means. But many of them may be more than 1,000 years old. Here's another MiSinai tune. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, which we use as the melody for Hatzi Kaddish before Musaf on high holidays, and from Yom Tov days, festivals, Ha'el b'tatumot uzecha, and the great Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol. One reason these MiSinai tunes have stayed with us for so long is that we use them so infrequently, so they do not change as easily as the melodies we use so often, like Lekha Dodi likrat kala. And since we sing this every Friday night, and we like some variation, people are inclined to change the tune. How do we know what the traditional nusach is? And how do we know that MiSinai tunes are truly ancient? Scholars of Jewish music spend their time researching these things. Manuscripts from Chazanim going back centuries. One key resource is this book by Chazan Avraham Veha-er, which was published, if you can believe this, in Sweden in 1883, who wrote to all of his cantorial friends all over Europe, asking them to send him their suite of melodies, and then he compiled them all in this book, Bal Tefillah. Now, you might be wondering, why is this important? And how might we derive meaning from all of this captivating, but maybe not entirely relevant information? But that's the question that rabbis always ask. Why is this meaningful to us? And let's face it, learning all of this is complicated. Why can't we just recite our prayers without singing at all? And why can't we just sing everything to show tunes and call it a day? From a practical standpoint, using melody makes the text easier to learn. My wife, who learned most of what she knows about Judaism as an adult, tells me that she cannot learn tefillot without a tune. Using distinct melodies and traditional tunes, and following the nusach tradition, also lends a sense of connectedness to the text, to the holidays, to the Jewish life cycle, and so forth. Traditional melodies like this one for Tal and Geshem ground us. They remind us of the past, of our ancestors, of our history, and of our moments of suffering and joy. And while show tunes may be great, they also bring with them the meaning and the baggage of their source material. So while I love Guys and Dolls, for example, if I were to sing everything to that, then I would be thinking about gambling and gangsters instead of Shabbat and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And although it would be nice to every now and then in shul sing, sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down, you're rocking the boat. And of course, there's so much more. And anybody who wants to learn more about Nusach or to improve on what they already know, please make an appointment with me, and I will be happy to teach you. This tradition is extraordinarily valuable and meaningful, and we should all strive to raise the bar when it comes to the music of the synagogue and Jewish ritual.